There's no question that music really ought to be a very strong part of the school curriculum right from the beginning. But, you know, the fascinating thing is trying to link music with many other aspects of what we do. So through dance, through storytelling, through numbers, through colours, through history, through geography, language, and so on. So it doesn't have to be an isolated form, because we know that not everybody is going to, you know, play a musical instrument, or not everybody is going to be interested in music, but it's just this feeling that it's an important part of our growth as human beings, and we want to invest in, you know, not just the young people, but also the elderly people as well. But we need to capture, obviously, the young people right from the beginning so that they understand the importance that music and sound has in their lives. And of course, we all develop at different speeds, you know, so some people may not be at all interested in music in their younger years, but suddenly, maybe when they reach their 20s or something, they think, actually, now I want to learn the cello, or I've always fancied playing the trumpet. Now I want to do that. So you don't have to be 8 years old or 12 years old or something like that to learn an instrument. It's never too late to do it. Well, you know, how people use their social time is quite different nowadays, and the whole music business has changed a lot since even I started about 20 years ago. And, you know, how you create a career as a musician is constantly changing. It really is. And I think that our concentration towards the sort of something being created by the raw hand, as opposed to being sort of enhanced cosmetically, you know, through technology, is something that's actually quite rare nowadays. I mean, you can basically create a recording in the privacy of your bedroom if you want, you know, and without being able to play a single note on an instrument. And that's, you know, in one respect, that's really quite fascinating. But on the other hand, it's also quite scary as well. And, you know, I think we do need to hold on to the fact that, you know, it's fascinating when something is absolutely generated organically from the human being and sound is created through the raw hand. It's very special indeed. And I think that the whole listening world of our younger people today is quite different to my generation, which is very different to, let's say, my parents' generation. So, you know, each generation has different sound experiences around them. And I think that it is much more technically enhanced now, or cosmetically enhanced, more synthetic, the sounds. And so to sit and listen to an orchestra or a string quartet or something like that is something that is actually quite alien to many, many people. They're not used to that kind of sound. And so there has to be another type of thing, often, not always, but often, in order to keep the interest of our listeners now, because they're used to the visual aid, the oral aid, the kind of participation and almost the expectancy of that. So the feeling that this is an event, as opposed to just sitting there, behaving yourself and using one sense to experience the music. Well, here at the Cabrillo Festival, we actually had our first rehearsal on Kevin Poots' percussion concerto just yesterday. And basically, this was the first time that the orchestra had read through the piece. Meanwhile, I had just spent a little while on the instruments, just finding out what they're like, the quality of the instruments, the width of the bars of each instrument varies from perhaps the instruments that I have at home. And so, you know, you might be used to playing on something and then suddenly you have a completely different sized instrument. And, you know, it takes a little while to get used to that. And so we met for the first time last evening all together. And then we'll have another rehearsal on the day of the concert. So actually not that much rehearsing together. That's actually quite normal. And meanwhile, in between, I'll just be working on one or two pieces from my own recital, but of course the hall is very rarely free because the orchestra is always doing something in the hall. So a lot of it is done just silently in my head. Well, in the final piece in the recital, Rhythmic Caprice by Leigh Stevens, basically I treat this piece slightly different to what is actually written on the printed music, and I play it more in a sort of gypsy style, slightly more rough, I think, more Hungarian than perhaps the lighter scherzo type of feel that perhaps was asked for originally. And so we have things like a few effects coming from the marimba, whereby I use the shaft of the stick, so the main body of the stick, against the edge of the bars, just to get a click type sound, and which is a very delicate sound, but it also means that it's quite hard on the actual stick itself, and it can sometimes crack, so it's always worthwhile having spare sticks at hand. And certainly we've had experiences where something might have broken, and so you just go and quickly pick up another stick. And then, you know, there are these sort of clusters that happen, which again, it's using the shaft of the stick, but basically laying it down hard on the accidental notes. And you just get this sploosh of sound, just a cluster of wooden sounds, because you're striking a few of the bars all at the same time. And then I actually, although it's not marked in the music, I sometimes put in some dead strokes, which is just basically keeping the mallet on the bar and not lifting the mallet off. So it basically prevents it from resonating. So it's a very short sound. But other than that, you know, it's quite straightforward. We're beginning to understand the importance of the music business and how people need to be aware that they are in a business. That's the reality of it. And in a way, it's too late to be practicing the art of business, you know, when you're actually in the business. This is something that has to be completely understood. I mean, of course, you're never going to understand everything until you're in the situation, but it has to be addressed at school, it needs to be addressed at the music institutions, and then at least there's a chance of truly being almost like an entrepreneur in the music business, rather than relying entirely on agents or competitions or PR people and situations like that. Interestingly, I was just talking to someone the other day, and they simply asked the question, well, how do you go about getting your name out there? Well, one of the most basic things that people do nowadays is to create their own website. Another thing is to, if you're performing somewhere, no matter how small you think the event might be, or how few people may be in attendance, is invite people you think are important to be there, and treat everything that you do with absolute integrity. I think it's very difficult to sort of analyse or put into words what you do in order to execute, the type of emotions to your audience. This is something that is quite innate, and it's something that really just happens. You don't necessarily, you can plan these things to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, you're dealing with a different type of hall. Here, it's quite a challenging hall to play in, because it's quite dry, and it then becomes really dry with people in there, and the audience are very, very close to the platform, and when you're giving a concerto, they're practically just right there in front of you, which is a very unusual type of experience. But also here we have a very different type of audience, because they're here because they're fascinated towards new music. And so, they're not kind of sitting out the new piece in order to hear the Beethoven or the Tchaikovsky or something like that. They really are celebrating in this art of new music. And of course, the composers are there, the musicians on stage are here because they want to be here. And so the whole atmosphere is really like a celebration. So, acoustics aside, you've then got something else that makes this very, very special indeed. And so already you've got, an audience who really care about new music. And I think, in a way, when you observe that type of thing, it's then just an innate thing to know what you want to do in order to almost play with your audience, sort of manipulate a situation. And, sometimes you might want to exaggerate something, sometimes you may just want